Thanks, everyone, for joining the Future Proof podcast. I'm here with Gregory Shepard. He is the CEO of Startup Science. I am Alex Mysinek. I am going to just introduce him and let him kind of talk about Startup Science, and we can go from there. Thank you for joining me, Gregory.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Thank you for taking your time out to have a conversation with me today. So, today I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about unpacking the science of startups and kind of what works, what fails, and kind of what's next for them. So, let's start off the bat with some, really good value for someone in the startup industry. Kind of what do you see that's like kind of the biggest avenue or the easiest way for someone that's looking to do a startup kind of to do that right?
Yeah, I think that if you're interested in being a startup, and this is a plug, but the book, The Startup Lifecycle, it really is written. It took me 4 years to write it and 5 years of research. So it's really a good first way to get into it. And then the second thing I would say is find an accelerator or an incubator near your area and then try to get in with them. And then the third thing I would say is join some of the groups like Startup Grind, Startup Nation, Founder Institute. There's a lot of these sort of associations and groups out there that'll really sort of get you exposed to the concept of building a startup.
Got it. Well, why don't you let everyone know kind of what's your background, what's your origin story, why are you qualified, and kind of why did you write the Startup Lifecycle?
Yeah, I've been building companies for 35 years. I've built and sold 12 companies, 4 private equity awards for transactions between 250 million and $1 billion. I co-founded the Fulbright Entrepreneurship Initiative, Fulbright being the largest academic institution, the initiative being focused on incubators inside of universities that help people get started in a startup. I also sold 2 companies to eBay, Enterprise Marketing Solutions, and became the Chief Strategy Officer for eBay Enterprise Marketing Solutions, followed by the CTO. Left that, went into politics, which was a huge mistake, and then researched why, when, and how founders fail for 5 years. Used that research then to try to get them to move money down to startups. They didn't, so I wrote this book and then started the platform to try to help startups from the bottom up instead of from the top down.
Got it. So, Startup Science, that your platform there, what are you really seeing? What opportunities or what are you kind of the bottlenecks or problems are a lot of the people that are doing startups coming to your site or talking in the forums about?
Yeah, I can tell you that the majority of the startups fail for bad decisions based on either the lack of wisdom. If you think about what wisdom is, you have data, information, and then wisdom. Right. So data becomes information, and that information is processed by humans and it becomes wisdom. So either that or they're getting bad advice. A lot of times founders, the majority of the time, they're getting bad advice and they're taking that as gospel, and then they're actually implementing it, and then that hurts them as well. So a lot of bad advice and a lot of just lack of experience.
So I think that's where Startup Science comes in. Is that why you started Startup Science, is to bridge that gap and give the good information versus the bad information?
Yeah, it's to take. So there's a fragmentation of the startup ecosystem. So if you think about startups, about 90% of startups fail. So 9 out of 10. So think about that. You got 10 people in line, 1 cat makes it, right? That is, for me, no other industry, I think, would accept that sort of failure, although our industry has accepted that for 40 years or something, right? So from my perspective, it was first of all, why is this happening? What's the big problem? And there were 2 big problems. One is that most founders don't understand the startup life cycle. So the stages that you go through, what to expect, right? If you go to university, you get your bachelor's and there's a series of classes and things you have to do. And then you get your master's and there's a series of classes you need to do, etc. Right? You go to high school. If you go to junior, there's a process for everything, but there isn't for startups yet. 97% of the U.S. economy is indirectly or directly attached to startups, and startups actually change the world. Think about the Riverside call we're on right now, the phone you use, the computer you use, everything all the way back to Henry Ford is entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs create and evolve the world, hence my focus on it, right? So if you think about that, you're okay, well, most of these people need to know where they are and where they're going. It's like a GPS. So part of the reason why I wrote the book is to give people guidance to understand what to expect. Like, here's where you are, here's where you're going, and here's what you need to know. Then the second part of the problem is a fragmentation of the ecosystem itself, meaning, you have mentors over here in this platform, and you have your cap table over here in this platform, and you have your valuation software over here, and your program manager for your accelerator over here, and, your different providers that you need to buy things from over here. And everything is divided up into all these separate platforms. So if you're a founder, you have like 12 different logins, 12 different fees, data all over the place. It makes it almost impossible. So what I wanted to do is pull it all into one platform so they have one login, no fees, and it's free for founders. And they have no fees, and they can actually build a startup in one place. Those two things, I think, will drop the failure rate. And my goal is to drop the failure rate by 20%. So if you can get the failure rate down to 70% or even 80%, that is significant considering, it's a $7 trillion market, startups, and there's a new startup every 10 seconds.
That's crazy. What do you, in the life cycle, when you wrote the life cycle, obviously, the whole kind of phase of it, but what phase of the startup life cycle do you see the kind of like the biggest mistakes or kind of that really the big gap of what they don't know when they're starting it that you're seeing?
Yeah. So let's go through the 7 phases first. So there's 7 phases, right? So you have the vision stage. It's where you create your vision and define your North Star, like who is your customer and who is your acquirer and all this stuff. And then you have product, where you create a product. And then you have go to market, where you start marketing your product. Standardization, which is where you go back and make sure that your operations are efficient and operating correctly. Optimization, which is largely looking at standardization to create optimization that creates margin in your company so that you don't build your company and put yourself out of business because you haven't considered all of these little problems that grow as your company grows. And then you have growth, which is where you lay down the pedal to the metal and go after it. And then you have exit, which is where you sell your company. 47.1% of founders fail in the first 18 months. And the rest of the founders in the research, I only did 5 years. So the rest of them failed over the following 4 years for things they did in the first 18 months. So the first 18 months is the most critical time for a startup to be successful. That's where all the problems happen.
And so you're in the vision. So what stage is that? Where are they failing? So what stage most likely?
Yeah, a lot of times it's things they did during the vision stage and the product stage, like not understanding who their customer is thoroughly. So they have a problem getting product market fit, right? They build something, but they didn't understand who the customer was, what the customer's problems are. They just had some vision in their head, but it wasn't validated directly with the people that they're trying to sell the product to, right? So you have to start out by saying, who's my customer? What are their problems? What do they want? Why would they buy my product? What's the problem solution impact for the customer? If once you nail down the problem solution impact for a customer, then you can go build your product to suit those things and then go talk to customers and get them to validate. Say, would you buy this and how much would you pay for it, right? Before you go and build a product, right? Then you build the product based off of the information you get from the from the customer, instead of just going based on your vision. A lot of founders, they go out and they're like, I have this great idea. I'm going to build an XYZ company. And they go do all the work and they go to market. And then they're sitting there going, nobody's buying. I don't understand. Well, it's because you didn't verify the needs of the customer before you did it. You just went out and built it. And so that's an important thing that's missed almost every time. It's incredible.
So now I'm guessing in startup science, in the platform where they can kind of go and get everything all in one vision, are those steps, and is that kind of that workflow built into it and kind of helps them, through that life cycle, the startup life cycle?
Yeah, it goes through it in the book, and it also goes through it in startup science in the platform, right? It tells them what these things are. It tells them why people fail for not doing these things. It's meant to try to steer off of the problems that most people face when they're in that first, 18 months.
Yeah. Okay. What I think that, I think it's super helpful to have everything all in one spot and to be able to access that all one thing, all your passwords, everything, at the tip of your fingers and kind of one platform. What else other than like the actual life cycle of the startup? Where does like startup science really kind of excel in helping them, achieve what they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so there's 3 things you need to know in order for me to answer that question. The first thing is you have the sort of the first component is that you have an innovation life cycle, which is value creation and value capture. Think of value as money. Creating your product, creating your vision, that's value capture or value creation, sorry. And then value capture is when you start selling your product and making money. Underneath that, you have the 7 stages of the life cycle that I went over earlier, right?
Mhm.
And so you have those 2 big phases. All of that sits under 2 major things, right? The top line is pre-early stage company, which is pre-A round company, meaning when you think about the rounds, you have your pre-seed, your series seed, and your A round. That's when you're raising capital. I focus on everything A round and earlier, not things after that. Those companies usually they don't need as much help. They tend to succeed the longer they're in existence most of the time, the better they have a chance of succeeding just because they have more time to figure things out. So I decided to focus in on the early stage because that's where all of the failures were actually happening.
Got it. Now, using that, so with that in mind, with the 3 stages and the platform, what do you think is like the most valuable part of startup science?
Oh man, I mean, it's the fact that it's everything in one place. I think that the academy where there's courses where you can learn, the capital area where you can find grants and investors, the marketplace where you can find people offering products and services at deep discounts to startups. Those seem to be shining as areas that are the most commonly popular.
Yeah, and there's a community inside it as well, or is there kind of a way for people to connect and kind of bounce ideas off each other? And
Yeah, there's a community forum, so it's sort of like a Reddit style thing that you can go in and you can communicate with other founders. There's also a knowledge base, so you can get like glossary and best practices and things along those lines. There is also an entire area that outlines tools. So these are things that find your competitors, your partners, your acquirers, and allow you to do market sizing so you can see how big the market is for the idea that you have. I mean, it is an inclusive platform. It's got everything that you need as a founder in one place,
yeah, I love that.
including mentors, right? So you can even go out and find and work with mentors.
That's huge. Yeah, I mean, so kind of talking more about that, maybe getting away from the platform a little bit. Like, where do you see the startup ecosystem in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I mean, AI has introduced an acceleration, right? So what you see, before robotics and things like that had hit more the blue collar workers, right? And you start to see that happen. And then the market adjusted, right? So, the people that works in factories, the market adjusted. Everybody's always worried about losing their jobs to technology, but in the history of our species, this has never happened, right? People just adjust to something else. So what you see robotics affecting the blue collar. Now you see AI affecting the white collar, right? So lawyers, accountants, consultants, all these people are starting to be displaced by AI because it does a better job than they do, and it's virtually free. What happens is those same people are professionals and subject matter experts. They're now becoming entrepreneurs. So what I see is a massive growth in startups because they're easier to do because of AI, and AI is displacing them. So instead of becoming a lawyer, maybe you create an AI platform that has a lot of the knowledge that you have in it and a lot of the knowledge that you train it. So I see an explosion, a huge explosion in entrepreneurship, which is what we've seen in the past in these scenarios.
Well, yeah, for that same scenario, like, yeah, a lawyer that gets displaced or maybe loses their job from, the practice that they have, they come to you and, start a startup for like an online platform with basically a 24/7 virtual attorney, like at their fingertips that can answer questions at 2 o'clock in the morning about a certain scenario.
Right. And then when it comes to drafting a document, they use the lawyer. So the lawyer becomes an entrepreneur using AI to boost their business. Right? So that's a scenario that I see happening already, and I think it's just going to accelerate. Right. I mean, AI is not a business; it's a tool for business.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people go, "Oh, I have an AI startup." What is that? You're using AI just like any other it's just software,
Yeah.
right? So you're just using software. You don't say you have an AI business. You say you're using AI. And even anymore, that's ridiculous because everybody is using. If you're not using AI, you're not going to be in business in a little while. Like
Well,
seriously.
yeah. I mean, it's in a couple of industries that I'm in, it's already like taking a massive role in changing things dramatically. What do you, for in the startup world and maybe like what you've seen, recently, or what's maybe one of the more interesting ways or the most beneficial ways that you've seen AI applied into a startup to help them really streamline things or, just improve their business?
Yeah, I mean, research is a huge tool, but what I see is that startups that are using AI to help them as a product, right? They're using it as a product. That's a good use of AI. If you're trying to use AI as a piece of software to help you, you should find somebody that's already created a piece of software to help you, right? Like if you're doing research and you're going to go try to do it on your own, you're going to have to train, use prompts and all this stuff to try to get the AI to do what you want it to do. The chances are somebody's already created that. So go find somebody that's already created that AI, all that stuff. Because prompting with AI is a huge thing, right? Most of the people that have a chat that they use, like ChatGPT or Gemini or Gork or Perplexity or whatever one you're using, they'll write short prompts like, can you give me blah, 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 right? Well, to get AI to do things deep, the prompts are massive. We're talking pages of prompting, right? To give the machine perfect instructions on how to return something back to you. That's not something you just sit down and write a page of prompts. You have to work with the AI for weeks, months, years to get down. One of the ones I recently acquired a company, they had been working on AI prompts for 5 years before they finally nailed it. And by the time they nailed it, they were just like, I just want to sell the company now, because it was like 5 years of research just to get it down. So I think that generally speaking, the future of business is going to be utilizing AI to build businesses, to save businesses from having to do it themselves because there's so much work and it could be reutilized.
Yeah, I think prompting, like you just said, alluded to, like prompting is one of the most important things too with like AI, and I think it's one of the harder ones to kind of master. I mean, you think that just saying, can you help me with this is going to give you an effective, output. It's more of like you have to give it context, you have to give it rules, you have to give it a background on what you're doing, you have to give it like a vision of what you want, and
And you have to
and
go
then
back and forth with it.
yeah,
You're
that's
negotiating with the AP, you're collaborating with it,
yeah,
right? You're
yeah, for sure.
negotiating and collaborating with this machine, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It takes a long time to get it right, and it's never really right because AIs tend to veer off on their own. They go like, I call it choose your own adventure. So, you have to constantly like reel them back in and say, no, 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 don't do that. Stay in these rails,
Yep.
right?
Or they call
So
it hallucinations or whatever.
yeah, hallucinations. It just starts going off on its own. So I think that what we see in the future is utilization of AI as a product from entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. Yeah, I'm excited to see where AI goes. I think they said something about that there's going to be AI will generate and create the first like one person billion dollar company in the
Yeah,
near
I
future.
mean, yeah, if you get the prompts right, I mean, you like this company I acquired, I mean, it took them 5 years, but what they ended up coming up with was really amazing. I
Well,
mean, it finds grants, matches them to a founder perfectly. Like
it's
I mean, something that would take you months and months and months and months to try to do, this thing does in a tenth of a second.
crazy. What
It's nuts.
Yeah, that is crazy. I mean, we could go on a whole episode about AI, but what for founders, I really want to give value to people that really can get a lot of value from you, considering that your main thing and what you do the best is the startup. So if every founder could only focus on one thing to survive, what would you tell them to do?
Customer.
Go.
Focus on the customer, right? Like so many founders that I see in my research, they're focused on their vision. Your vision is only good until you start talking to customers, and then it's the customer's vision. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that, the art, building a startup is an art in terms of the idea. But building the actual startup is a science. There is a way that you go about building a business. And it's the same regardless of the type of business you build. That's the startup life cycle, right? But the idea is an art, but building the business is a science. And that's really important for founders to remember. Your vision has to be executed. And there is an existing process that I've outlined in that book for executing your vision. Because most founders, they fall apart after they have their vision and they get it all worked out and everything. And they're like, okay, now I've got my product. What now? Like, what do I? I got to go get customers. I got to create marketing. And then even when they get customers, they're like, okay, what now? I got to service my customers, right? There are stages. That's what the life cycle is about, right? Or there's these stages that you go through. That's the science, literally, like by definition, and the idea is the only art, right? I have this idea to solve this problem. That is a creative thing, but building the business is a more logical, analytical workflow.
Where do you see most startup companies like with the customer piece in mind? Where do you see them fail the most? I know you said they got to focus on the customer, focus on that, but where do you really see what they could improve on to, improve that with the customer? Like, where's the disconnect?
Understand there's two things. Having your persona, this is the person that works at the company, your customer, and the ICP, the ideal customer profile, which is the company. A lot of times founders will build something for the company, but forget about the person that works at the company. So in the age of AI, a lot of times they're trying to sell something that's going to make the company more efficient, but get the person they're talking to laid off, right? So obviously you're not going to get any headroom, right? They're going to kill that deal before it even gets to their boss. So you have to make sure that you understand who you're talking to and their problem that you're trying to solve. Don't jump over them and solve the problem for the company. First, focus on the person you're talking to. People do business with people, not companies, right? So solve the problem for the person, and then then you can move your way in. It's a land and expand strategy.
That's huge. I mean, customer service is the most important thing in every business, I think. At the end of the day, you can have the best product, you can have the best service, but if you don't have customers, you don't have anything. So,
Yeah.
so your book, last thing, your book, Startup Lifecycle, when you're reading it or looking through it, giving it to founders that are just starting, what do you think is what's your favorite section or like favorite part of the book? What really kind of sticks out to you, like that you enjoy the most about it?
For me, it's different than what they like. I'll tell you what they like. They like the idea of planning for your exit when you start.
Okay.
A lot of
Interesting.
people don't realize that if you're going to sell a business to somebody, you have to build the business for them. Just like you're trying to sell a product to somebody, you're building a product for them, right? So you have to understand who you're going to sell your business with to when you start. You don't just like build a business and then go, okay, let me go find a buyer.
Yeah.
Just like you wouldn't go build a product and say, okay, let me go find a customer, right? So you have to plan those two things at the same time. Your buyer's customer should be the same as your customer. Otherwise, they're not going to get what they want, which is to grow the lifetime value of their customer. So think about this. A big corporation already has thousands and thousands of customers. And there's this thing called a CAC to LTV, a customer acquisition cost to lifetime value ratio, right? Well, if you're building a business to sell to somebody, that person's buying it to grow their lifetime value because they've already paid for the customers they have. That's the customer acquisition cost. If you're not growing their lifetime value, they have no incentive to buy you. In other words, if they can't sell your product to the customers they already have, they have no incentive to buy you. That's not something you can do after you're done building a company and ready to sell it. That's something you have to do at the very beginning.
I was just going to ask you, if a business if a startup's already started and they didn't really think about the exit when they were building it, kind of what are they going to have to identify, and what's probably the most important thing to look at? Is it going to be the CAC to lifetime ratio,
It's
or
going to
what?
be making sure that, I would say it's going to be make sure that your customers, that your buyer, your acquirers, ideal customer profile and yours are the same. That is key, super, super key. Like, a big corporation, if you sell baseballs and they're in the basketball industry, that you're not going to be able to sell to them, right? So you have to make sure if they're selling baseballs that you're building a baseball company to sell to them, right? So
It makes sense. I mean, but yeah, when you're starting up the business, if you're starting up a business, if you're just starting too, and if it's the first one that you're building or the first startup you build, the fact of trying to exit your company is probably the last thing that's on your mind. I mean, you're probably, if you're not super experienced with it, that's not where your mind's going to go. It's going to be kind of just getting everything ready to start it up and getting your ideal client and your ICP and everything there. And then all of a sudden, yeah, you might be too far down the road where you didn't even think about the exit.
right. Yeah, and if you've already gone down that road a little while, then just stop, go find your acquirers, and make sure you find an acquirer that has the same customer as yours.
I love
I mean,
it.
if you think about it, the big cost is of getting a customer. If you go to a grocery store, The big cost is getting you into the door. So they optimize you all the way out to the checkout line when they're trying to sell you gum and magazines, impulse buys, right? So the big cost is getting a customer. If they already have sunk that cost, they're trying to sell them gum and magazines. That's your product being sold to their customers,
Got
right?
it.
But if your customers are going into a grocery store and their customers are going into Nordstrom, you know what I mean? You don't have a match. They're not going to buy you because it's the wrong customer. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah, absolutely. No, and I think the other thing that I was listening to is like the face of it, like the face of the company, the like the marketing, the branding, all that stuff. It has to be super transferable because if you're the face of the company and you're trying to sell it, that's almost impossible to do too.
Yeah, if you're a solo entrepreneur and you're trying to sell your business, that's not going to work because you are the business,
No, exactly.
right? So we call
Well,
them solopreneurs.
yeah, solopreneurs. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, Gregory. Why don't you shout out Startup Science, the platform, and then your book? Kind of where can people find it? Where can they get in touch with you?
Sure, it's startupscience.io. My website is gregoryshepard.com, and the Startup Lifecycle is the book. You can buy it in Amazon or anywhere. You can buy it at Barnes and Noble, any bookstore.
Yeah,
It's an Audible also, so you can listen to it.
I'm definitely gonna get myself a copy. I appreciate your time, Gregory, and it was awesome chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.